Hello and welcome to my latest vlog. Today I'm recording not in Grey Abbey but in another town that begins with G, the town of Garva. Garva is the town where I grew up. It's where I went to primary school and secondary school. It's where I went to church. It's where we lived before we moved to Grey Abbey. It means a lot to me, this town, lots of memories in it. And I was in it today and there was just one thing in Garva that I thought I wanted to share with you all that sort of fits into the vlogs that we've been doing, and we'll get to it in a minute. There's a biblical principle, there's just something that I found in one area in Garva here. But you might say, well, what's Garva got that Grey Abbey's got? Well, there's one thing that I want to try and show you here about Garva that Grey Abbey would love to have. Out behind me you'll see the main street of Garva, and look at all those parking spaces. I'm sure we would love to have half of those parking spaces in Grey Abbey. One of the major landmarks in Garva is just behind me here. It's the town clock. It's also the war memorial. You'll see the names just of all of the folks who fought and lost their lives in the war. The clock itself is about 40 feet high. I have had the privilege and the challenge of climbing up to the top of it with my dad on one occasion. It's quite tight up there, but it's nice to have said that I have stood at the top of Garva town clock. There's a great view from it, and it's very obvious for people coming in both sides of the town. Garva's quite a historic town as well. Behind me you'll see a very fancy set of gates here, not in their original location. These gates were the gates of Garva House, which was the plantation house of the Canning family, who were involved in the 1600s in planting the town of Garva. The house that they built, Garva House, is no longer there. It was knocked down in the 1960s to make way to build the first secondary school in Northern Ireland, an experiment for folks who were not that academic to go to high school or on to university, but to get a secondary education that would help them find work. That was the school where I went to and had lots of memories of it. Now it's sadly closed. The house is gone and the school is sitting closed up. But in behind me here, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's a building in there, and I'll get you to the sign here, which Garva's got its own heritage museum. The whole history of Garva, the whole Ban Valley area is recorded in there, and it's a lovely spot. But the Cannings were quite a wealthy family. Obviously, as a plantation family, they rose to the peerage in the 1800s, and they got the title Lord Garva. And later on in the 1800s, one of the first settlers, the first settler was George Canning, and George Canning Jr. a couple of hundred years later became Prime Minister. So he did. So that was a bit of a historical link. But one of the Lord Garvas loved to travel, and it was on his travels that he saw a particular type of architecture that really captured his imagination, and he brought a little slice of that very world famous architecture back to Garva. Now I'm going to have to hit the pause button because I'm going to have to get into the car and drive and let you see this piece of particular architecture. So if you bear with me till I just drive on up the street a wee bit here. So I've made my way up to the very top of the town into Garva Forest. This was formerly part of the estate, the 600 and something acres of Garva House, the original plantation estate. This is a working forest now. It's the headquarters for the Forestry Service for the northern half of Northern Ireland, but it's also a playground for mountain bikers. There are many miles of mountain bike tracks. That's one that I've walked up to get up here. There's another little one down behind me. I used to love mountain biking in here myself, and plan to do so this summer if all goes well. But I'm not here to talk about the forest or mountain bikes. There's something quite interesting in the edge of Garva Forest. Lord Garva was a travelling man. He loved to travel around the world, and he saw this particular structure, and we would be thinking of countries like Mexico and Sudan, Guatemala, and probably most famously Egypt, to think of this particular type of structure. For Lord Garva, when he was on his travels, saw pyramids, and he was so taken by them that he came back and he built one in Garva. Now, granted, this is not as grand a structure as you would see in Guatemala or in Egypt, but it's a pyramid nonetheless, inspired by his travels out to Egypt and other countries. This was, his purpose was to be buried in here, but it was It was covered up. You can see that's the old door, and the stairs used to go down. I remember it being open. The steps used to go right down, and there was a burial crypt and all in there, but it was all sealed up. No one ever buried in here, but it still remains as an interesting part of the town of Garva. This was Lord Garva's preparations for his death. And as we think of the Egyptians, they have some really intricate preparations for their death and their pyramids, and they load lots of stuff into them, thinking that they'll take that into the next life. We know you can take nothing with you from this life to the next life, but we certainly have to make preparations. And I've made some preparations. At the other end of Garva, the church where I used to worship, there's a plot at the back of that church that's got my name on it, and that's where I'll be buried, unless somebody buries me somewhere else. But I've made that kind of practical preparation, certainly not as grand as a pyramid. But of course there's other preparations we have to make, and the preparation for leaving this scene of time and going into eternity is to know Jesus. In Matthew 7, Jesus talks about people who will cry, "Lord, Lord, did we not do all of these things for you?" And Jesus will say, "I never knew you." That is a preparation that we must make to be ready. It's not building big grand burial crypts, not even getting a plot at the back of a church or in a cemetery somewhere. It's about knowing Jesus personally, having a personal relationship with him. That is the grandest and the best preparation that we can make for eternal life. And next week, I'm going to finish off with one more vlog in this little series about some of the preparations that Jesus has made for us. So please come and tune in next week as we look at that. Hopefully you've enjoyed just seeing a couple of things about Garva, and I trust we'll see you next week and you'll be blessed. Take care.